All right, guys, this is your video regarding the Renaissance. And I'm also going to show you quickly, if you weren't in class today, what you need to have for the next time I see you in class, what you need to do. All right, so I'm going to really quickly go through the PowerPoint for the Renaissance and explain to you why that this is so important. Everything that we're going to talk about between now and really between now and almost Christmas will be considered the Renaissance. And the Renaissance is going to be a rebirth of art and literature, politics, culture, social reforms, church reforms, religion reforms. So, everything that we're going to talk about between now and really almost Christmas is going to have to do with the Renaissance. So, it's not going away. But the Renaissance is important for many different things. It's important because we have an increase in education, we have an increase in cultural change, we have an increase in political change. And so there's so many different things that we talk about that is an impact in society during this time period. All right. So we're going to talk about briefly a couple of different things this time. The one is art, and then one is briefly on education. And education during the Renaissance, it expands multiple times. So this is just one time we're going to talk about education. Education is going to be something we talk about multiple times during the Renaissance. This is just one brief section of the Renaissance we're going to talk about. One of the things that happens to create a change in the Renaissance and bring about the Renaissance was actually a pretty gruesome aspect of history, and that was the Black Plague, the Black Death. One of the things that I miss teaching, I miss actually teaching you guys. I'm one of the weird history things. I love to talk about weird history. Your nursery rhyme that you sang as little children, Ring Around the Rosie, is about the Black Plague. So if you remember the nursery rhyme, Ring Around the Rosie, pocket full of posies, ashes, ashes, we all fall down, that's about the plague. The plague would come about, it would have the little red pustules would come up on your skin, and it was red, and they would be rings. Pocket full of posies, you would carry around, posies would be flowers, and so you would carry around flowers or put flowers in your pockets to mask the smell of death that was all around you. Ashes, ashes, well, you would burn the bodies. That was really the only way to get rid of the massive amount of bodies that came about from the death, from all the people dying. And then we all fall down. Well, so many people were dying. So that nice little nursery rhyme that you sang as children, that was actually about the Black Plague, the Black Death. But so many people dying during the Black Death, about the plague, actually brought about the Renaissance. And the reason is before the Renaissance started, and we're talking about around 1500s, before the Renaissance started, most people never traveled more than 10 miles away from their home. And before the Renaissance started, and the Black Plague happened, people had to move, because either you moved because you were having to quarantine, you were having to move away from where the plague was happening, because it was safer to do that. Like we were quarantining, during COVID, or you had to move because people were dying and you had to make a living. Like if you worked for someone and that person died, you had to then move to go and find a job somewhere. So for the first time, people were having to move away from their livelihood, where they were living. And so as you were moving away from there, you were traveling more. And so as you were traveling, more trade was happening. more cultures were mixing. So for the first time in a long time, you actually were mixing cultures and trade, and it was just a time period where we'd never seen before so many people moving around. So the Renaissance actually means rebirth. And this is a time period where society is going to be reborn. And it's going to be a political rebirth, a social rebirth, an economic rebirth, cultural rebirth. And this is all things that we're going to look at over the next few weeks. Okay. But today, specifically, we're going to look at a little bit at education and art. All right. So, in humanist movement, this is what we're going to look at for art. We're going to look at how art, specifically sculptures and paintings, focus on human being more realistic. And then we're going to take a look at in the later weeks how that people are focusing more on humans, like how people think and how they feel. We're going to focus more for the first time on human emotions than we have before. Now, the Renaissance starts in Italy. And if you were to take a look at Italy, the reason why it starts in Italy is because Italy is surrounded by water. It's smack in the middle of what we would consider at that time period an established Europe. At that point in time, you got to think that this is the 1500s, not the 2020. So at that point in time, that was what was the established Europe. And so it's surrounded by water. There's ports everywhere. So it's very easy for boats to get in and out of it. And so Italy is rich, and it's rich because of all the trading it can do. So this is the Renaissance where it's going to begin, and why it begins there, because they have the money to start it there. We're going to see a lot of religious themes in the art during the Renaissance. And one of the things that we're going to see is the perspective. It's a new way of art to come about. It's called perspective, and it gives depth to the pieces of art, making it seem more realistic. And that's what we're going to look at. The first artist we're going to look at is Michelangelo. And as you take a look at Michelangelo's sculpture here called David, this is from David and Goliath from the Bible. If you take a look at David's hand and you take a look at your hand, and you'll see right here at the wrist, like the bone, like it looks like a real bone there. And you take a look right here, and you can see the tendons and the muscles and the veins and the knuckles. And if you take a look at the tendons in the neck, and you take a look at the muscular in the chest, like that's stone. And he did that in the 1500s with just simple tools. And he didn't have a teacher to teach him that. He just did it. Okay. And if you take a look at this one's even more impressive. The veins in the hand, and the bone right here. And like right here at the thumb, the fingernail, and the ridges in the thumb, and then the knuckles. People who've actually seen this sculpture says it looks like he could take a breath. And this is what we call perspective. It looks like a true human being. And then if you take a look at this one, this is called the Pieta. And this is Mary holding Christ after he has been taken off the cross, after he's has been crucified. And if you were to zoom in on this, and you can see the tendons in the legs, and you could see the ribs right here on Christ and his side. And you could see even like it looks like where the sword pierced his side. But just look at the robes. It looks like actually cloth, and that's stone. And this is just artwork that had never been seen before. And Michelangelo was like none other, and still today like none other. But he didn't just do sculptures, he did artwork also. In Canvas, I've dropped a virtual tour you could take of the Sistine Chapel. He painted the Sistine Chapel in Italy. And this is a whole ceiling that he did. And he also did parts of the sides of the walls, and then the back and the front. He laid on a scaffold on his back and painted the ceilings. This is the most famous part of it, the creation of man. And if you just zoom in on Adam, you would see the same thing. You would see the muscles in the chest, and you would see the tendons, and you would see the hand, and just the perfect dimensions of the hand. And how he was able to do this as well, he dissected human bodies. He and Da Vinci both, which is the other person we're going to talk about, because they didn't have x-rays, and you can get so much by looking at somebody, but you can't really tell how the muscles attach to the bone just by looking at a hand. And you can't really tell that. You can't really tell how the muscles attach to the skeleton just by looking at someone. You have to be able to kind of really dig down and look at it. And so this is what Da Vinci and Michelangelo both did. And you might be kind of grossed out by it, but that's what they did. They just dissected human bodies. So this is what they did to make it look more realistic. Now, if you take a look at other artists from this time period, Donatello and Raphael, beautiful work, but not to this detail. Okay? So Da Vinci. Da Vinci was an amazing person. He was interested in not only art, but plants, anatomy, architecture, engineering, math, science, inventions. So he was very important in everything. One of the more important things that he did, one of his more famous paintings that he did, was The Last Supper. Now, this is actually not a painting. This is a mural that is on the back of a church in Milan. It's not in really good shape. They don't really know how to fix it, just due to the fact that it's on the back of a wall. But what's important about this mural is the colors. Not a lot of colors like this had been done before. All the blues. And then if you take a look at each individual person has so much detail. But then if you take a look back behind the picture, so much detail behind it. That was what was amazing. So many people before Da Vinci had not put so much detail in the background. And that's what he did. Like people would be like, you put so much detail behind it. Why? And he was like, why not? So this was amazing for Da Vinci and for everybody, really, how much detail that he put back behind it. Arguably, his most famous painting is the Mona Lisa. Nobody really can tell you why it's so famous. It just is. It's a very small painting. It's not very big. We know nothing about who this woman is. We don't know her true name. Mona just means like Mrs. or Madam in Italian. Lisa is just kind of like a name to have in Italy. We know nothing about who she is. All we do know is that whoever paid him to paint this portrait never got it. He kept it with him for the rest of his life. But what's so amazing about the painting is not Lisa herself, it's all the detail again back behind her. Again, beautiful painting and just the detail of it. He was also one of the first to combine math and science with art. The Vitruvian Man shows the proportional of systems between math and science and art. If you hold out your arms and from fingertip to fingertip, that's how tall you are. Well, he was really one of the first ones to figure that out and put it on paper. So again, he combines proportions with art and science. Inventions. I've dropped a PowerPoint into Canvas, and not only does it show some of the inventions he's done, it also shows the drawings that he did when he did do his dissection of human bodies. Guys, I cannot even go into how many inventions he did. he drew. And here's the thing, people have come back like 400 and 500 years later and actually have been able to put his inventions, his blueprints, and make his inventions, and they work. Tanks, submarines, scuba gear, machine guns, helicopters, parachutes, robots, double decker bridges, drawbridges. Guys, I can't even name all of them. If you go into YouTube and just type in Da Vinci inventions, you can see all the things, or not all the things, but you can see a lot of things that he has done and that people have come back and made prototypes of, and they work. Hand gliders. I think I said scuba gear already. Agricultural machines that work, that we have implemented and use today. Gears, like gears that run machines, are in use today because of him. The man was a time traveler, is the only thing I can guess. Um, he has over 13,000 pages of notes and drawings that we know of that have just intricate drawings of inventions that he's come up with. Just the fact that he thought of this stuff and knew that they could work, he just didn't know how to make them work because he didn't have the technology to make it. But then 300-400 years later, we had the technology, we can make it work. Amazing. All right, briefly, Shakespeare. Shakespeare is going to be important because of the literature, because of the words that he just makes up words. Over 37 known plays, poems, sonnets. The reason why he's so important, though, is because he helps contribute to literacy. He makes, I think it's like something like 400 words that he just makes up that we use today. And here's why that's going to be important. In 1477, Johann Gutenberg, he takes a printing press, and there is a video in Canvas that I do want you to watch. Johann Gutenberg takes a printing press that he sees or he knows of in China, and he improves upon it. And he's able to make it to where now we can print books in mass quantities. Before, books had to be printed, they had to be written by hand, and then they had to be put together by hand. But now, because of Gutenberg, we can mass produce books. Now, the video that I'm showing you in Canvas, it shows you that the books can now be printed by hand, but they still had to be put together, like they had to be sewn together by hand. So it's still going to be a tedious process, but it's still quicker than having to be written out by hand. But here's the thing, the little pamphlets, the little plays from like Shakespeare, quicker. Newspapers, pamphlets, all of this can be done so much quicker. And this is going to increase literacy because, believe it or not, we have coffee shops in Switzerland and Sweden and in Germany. And you can sit down at a coffee shop with a newspaper or with one of Shakespeare's plays. And if you can read even just a little bit, you can sit there and sound out your words. And all of a sudden now you're able to read a lot better. So things like Shakespeare's plays, Geoffrey Chaucer's plays, the Bible, newspapers are going to be able to be mass produced a lot quicker due to the printing press from Johann Gutenberg. And it's going to be able to help literacy. In some instances, in some years, we're going to see literacy go up 67% just because of the printing press. Not only that, we're going to be able to see that things like the Bible, and other books are going to be able to be written in something called the vernacular. Vernacular just means it's written in your language. So before this, the Bible could only be written in something called, the Bible was only written in Latin. Well, not a lot of people could read Latin, and that's what we'll get into for the Reformation. But now we can have it printed in what's called the vernacular, which means your language. So if you spoke German or Italian or English or French, now it can be printed in your language. That's your vernacular. So this is going to also help increase education. So before the Renaissance, not many people could read or write. But now, due to the printing press, due to the fact that we can mass produce books, newspapers, and plays in your language, it's going to help with literacy and education. Okay? So, what you need to do before I see you again is you need to make sure that you are going in to the Renaissance module, and you need to make sure you are reading your modules, Middle Ages. You've got 2 videos to watch. You have vocabulary words right here. Okay, you need to make sure you're copying down those vocabulary words. And then you'll find the definitions in the vocabulary words in the Renaissance Read It, in the PDF, and in the PowerPoint I just went over. Because the next time I see you, you will have a quiz that you'll have to do in class using those vocabulary words. And then you're going to have a reading passage quiz, and those are both going to be due in class the next time I see you. You also have just a small little video to watch about living in Renaissance Italy. And then that's the little PowerPoint I was telling you about Da Vinci inventions. You can look at it if you want to. You don't have to. The Sistine Chapel virtual tour. Again, you can look at it if you want to. And then the printing press. I would like for you to watch that. That's pretty interesting. And then when next time I see you, there'll be some additional vocabulary that you'll need to have for the big test that we'll have one day next week. I'll hopefully have more information for you next time I see you. And then we'll talk about the Gimkit that you can have be practicing on for when we do have the big test whenever we have that. All right. In addition to that, I am working on grades in Canvas. Please know that you may not have a grade in there yet that you should have a grade in. I'm working on that. It's all a work in progress. So, don't panic yet. If you think that there's a grade in there that's wrong, just either email me or we can work on it in class over the next couple of days, but we will fix it. And then otherwise, if you had any questions, just email me or we'll talk about it in class. Okay? All right. So I hope you have a good day, and I will see you either tomorrow or Thursday.